Mr. 27 Rings, Mets King, and making his Smashmouth Baseball podcast debut, Cali Athletic. Today we will be talking sabermetrics and how it is changing the game as we know it. But with more on that, here is Mets King.
As Euchre Squad said, today's topic is one that has caused a stir amongst players, coaches, management, and analysts, and fans. Today we will talk about the usefulness or lack thereof of sabermetrics and its corresponding stats. Quick little tidbit, and really all you need to know to familiarize yourself with sabermetrics is the show Brian Kenny on MLB Network hosts called MLB Now. And for me, that show alone has caused great anger inside my dark soul. But first things first, we will kick things over to Mr. 27 Rings for him to talk about sabermetrics. Take it away, Mr. 27 Rings.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Mr. 27 Rings here. I'm gonna flat out tell you, I am not a big fan of sabermetrics. It did start in 1980 with Bill James as a member of the Red Sox organization. They're trying to revolutionize something in the game. They're trying to put in stats to quantify things that are just not really needed. There's been a winning formula already established before 1980. All right. The Yankees and the Cardinals both have the most championships in baseball history. There's a reason why they did trades, they drafted, and did more to what they did. Okay. The very first trade the Yankees did was getting Babe Ruth, and they stockpile on talent, put it all together, and they just win. Babe Ruth mashed home runs. They got pitchers that win 9 innings. They had clutch hitting. They had clutch pitching. There's really nothing more or nothing less that you need to win a championship. They've been doing it since 1920, 1930, 40, 50, and 60. All right. When free agency first started in 1975, 1976, the Yankees signed the first big free agent at the time, Reggie Jackson. Now, when they brought him on, a lot of people in the clubhouse didn't like Reggie. Okay. He's a free agent. He wasn't part of the team. But you know what? They put their differences aside for that 1 or 2 years, and they managed to win a title. Now, things were crazy in the Bronx, as we all know, and eventually they lost a couple of years. They traded him, and things moved on. All right. Steinbrenner bought the team. In the 80s, they didn't have much luck. They started winning again in the 90s because they drafted a guy like Derek Jeter in 92. They bought Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada. They bought all that talent together, and they made trades to get Tito Martinez and Paul O'Neill. Okay, there was no need for sabermetrics to tell me, or at least tell them, how the Yankees how to do their job. They did great scouting. They made timely trades, and because they put that together, they've won all those championships. Now, everybody keeps saying the Yankees bought their players. They didn't just buy them. All right. That's a stigma that everybody put on them because they keep winning with the same winning formula. They didn't start really buying big name players until the year 2002 with Giambi. Then they start buying all these big name players. Has it been successful? Not really. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is sabermetrics. Does sabermetrics play a part for the Yankees to win? No, not a chance. Did it help the St. Louis Cardinals? No. They just drafted good players, did the same thing the Yankees did, traded, and put a good team together. Now, not just Bill James in the sabermetric world. The King brought up Brian Kenny. Brian Kenny is trying to start a revolution of bringing advanced metrics instead of using regular stats and regular things that we use to quantify by using our eyes and using our vision to see, okay, this player is good. He's trying to bring other things like WAR to measure a player's value on the field versus on another team. He's trying to use these things to measure a legacy player like Babe Ruth versus Mike Trout, if there was a debate for that. And To me, you don't need war. You don't need these extra stats to tell why Babe Ruth is the best player of all time. The numbers speak for itself. Okay? Now, the Oakland A's tried to use Moneyball, they tried to use Sabermetrics, and it took them a long time to build a great team, but they never really won anything, yet they're glorified in Moneyball. Okay? The Kansas City Royals went through about 10 years of laughter, of losing, being last place, but they built their team based on drafting and trading. And it finally paid off the last 2 years with the World Series appearance, and then they finally won last year. Did they use sabermetrics? I know their GM, president, boss, they're a big fan of it, but the idea behind sabermetrics is you're supposed to put a team together, use these stats. It may play a small part, I could say, but it's not. It's the talent that you bring together. And finally, the New York Mets. Sandy Alderson is another guy that's into sabermetrics. When he took over the Mets, they were shambles. They had nothing. They went through the worst losses you could possibly imagine. And he was able to make some thrifty trades. He got Matt Harvey in the draft. He picked up Noah Syndergaard and DeGrom for Dickey, which was a steal. He traded Beltran to get Zach Wheeler. Okay, did he need sabermetrics to tell him that those pitchers are going to be great? No. Now, he tried to put together a team of used parts to help out David Wright and them. Didn't work. So he had to make a big trade, and he got Yoenis Cespedes. Did sabermetrics tell him that Cespedes was available in the market and he's like the best hitter to pick up at the time? No, it just happened to be a chance where the Tigers were out of it and they wanted to dump him. And Cespedes helped the Mets go to the World Series. So it goes back to the same point as I'm going to end it right now. It's the same thing. Drafting, trading. That's it. Sabermetrics does not play a big role as people think it is. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. 27 Rings, good job. I also want to add to that like he said, while everyone thinks the Yankees bought their players, and they did buy a good share of their players, most of their winning came before the year 2002. They've only won one title since then, which was in 2009. When the Yankees did their winning, this was before sabermetrics was even an ideal in people's heads. You don't need sabermetrics to win. The Yankees have proved that. The Yankees won by being the Yankees, by getting Reggie Jackson, they would make splashes. People are scared to make splashes in free agency now because they're too worried about their UZR and their garbage sabermetrics tests that don't really add up. They're too worried about that instead of making the moves that the Yankees would do, that even the Red Sox did when they won their World Series. You got to tell me David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez and Kurt Schilling, you got to tell me those guys are based on sabermetrics? No, those are proven winners that can't be measured by sabermetrics. But before I get on a huge rant, I'll have my time. We're going to move over to our next guy making his podcast debut, and that's going to be Mr. Cali Athletic. So take it away, Cali Athletic.
Thank you, Mets King. As an Oakland A's fan, I have mixed reactions to the term sabermetrics and what it brings to the table. In fact, my team is a major partner in sabermetrics and has helped create Moneyball due to the ideals and little payroll. Moneyball is a tricky subject. It's a formula of evaluating players for unseen stats such as WAR, on-base percentage, F4, and so on. Billy Beane came on in 1998 with his Moneyball philosophy as general manager and has compiled a .533 winning percentage with over 1,500 wins, good for fourth best in the American League. In this case, that success has brought many division titles, but has yet to show that it can provide enough October stars and championships. Billy Beane's idea of finding diamonds in the rough is players who have been forgotten or whose teams have just given up on them. He digs deep into stats that no one else looks at, such as sabermetrics, and has somehow compiled great regular season success. But there's a reason guys like Scott Hatterberg were cheap and fit the budget, because these players perform in the regular season, but are not clutch players and are not October-ready players. You cannot measure the clutch gene from a computer because at any given time, a player can hit a game-winning grand slam in the playoffs to win a World Series but had 0 hits prior, and then what? Bottom line is Oakland has yet to prove that Moneyball and Sabermetrics can get them deep into October and bring a championship to the ring-hungry fans in Oakland. Until he gets either a raise in payroll or evaluates Moneyball, the A's will have a hard time finding success that they strive for in October.
Okay. From an A's fan, that's actually pretty interesting. First and foremost, I want to say that Moneyball, the movie, was a complete joke. And for anyone who actually likes that movie, I like the movie for the actors, and that's about it. The idea and premise of that movie is total nonsense. It actually proves that Moneyball does not work. Oakland, in that movie, you've seen that a team like the Twins, and the Yankees beat Oakland because they had better players, more money to spend, better teams. While Oakland simply used sabermetrics and low-key players, and they didn't win anything. So that alone proves. By the way, at the end of the movie, what team did Billy Beane reject from going to? The Boston Red Sox. And guess what happened to the Boston Red Sox? They won 3 World Series after that without Billy Beane's sabermetrics nonsense. So, good job by Cali Athletic. Next time, try not drinking. I heard a little slip up, No, put the beer down. I know you're an A's fan and you need it, but it was a good job for your first time, and great job, and we hope to see you soon. Our next person is going to be a person named Euchre Squad, a Brewers fan who doesn't need sabermetrics or good players because that team is complete trash. But we'll let him say his statement, and we'll go on to Euchre Squad.
All right, thank you, Mets King. I'm going to stray off of sabermetrics a little bit, but I will make one quick note. The Brewers have not really used it in the past because Doug Melvin has been the general manager for a very long time. But just in the past few seasons, as the rebuild has begun, they decided to hire a new, very younger general manager, and his name is David Stearns. He is actually the youngest GM in the league today, and he is now trying to incorporate the sabermetrics into the team and help put it into the league because of how young he is, and that's how he grew up learning the game now, because that's the way it's changing. As you said, Brian Kenny is a big part in that. He's putting it in everybody's heads. But sabermetrics, screw that. That's all that I need to say about that. I am going to talk about the pitcher's win-loss stat. I think it is one of the most ridiculous stats in baseball. Here's a hypothetical for you. If a game is 12-14 in the ninth inning and a relief pitcher comes in the top of the ninth and, pitches and, or it's tied at 12, I should say. My apologies. It's tied at 12. And relief pitcher comes in top of the ninth and keeps it tied, and his offense walks off in the bottom of the inning, there's no reason that pitcher should get the win after possibly their entire pitching staff that could pitch that day also pitched but gave up 12 runs. The pitcher shouldn't be getting a win. In that situation, it is the offense's thing that got them the win. So I think it is just a ridiculous stat. Let's go off of in 2014, Jeff Samardzija at the beginning of the season was a Chicago Cub. His stats were as follows. He had a 1-7 record in 17 games with a 2.83 ERA, 103 strikeouts, and only 31 walks. And he was traded to the A's in July at the deadline, but that's a different story. Samardzija was statistically one of the better pitchers in the first half of the season that year, especially in the National League, but statistically was considered one of the worst when you looked him up because his record was only 1-7. 7 losses compared to 1 win, but with such a low ERA and such a great strikeout to walk ratio, he really was a good pitcher. There was a game where he came back out in the top of the ninth in a 2-2 game to try to keep it tied. Well, he ended up throwing 128 pitches that game and not recording the win in the end. That is way too many pitchers for a guy getting paid that much money to pitch 30 starts a year. That throwing that many pitches at a time could very easily injure a pitcher. The only time you really see guys do it anymore is if they're throwing a no-hitter or a perfect game. After that game, then coach Rick Renteria was quoted saying, "I left him in to get his first W." I think that is one of the most stupid things I've ever heard a coach say, to let, at that time, their number one pitcher throw 128 innings because he wanted him to get a win. That stat is absolute BS. There's no reason for it. the pitcher isn't really the one getting the win. Yes, he's the one holding back the other team from scoring, but it is the offense that is doing the scoring to get ahead of the other team. They there should be no wins, not for batters, not for pitchers, not there should be the win-loss record for the team overall, and that is it. So with the win-loss records the way it is, if they would just take it away, I think that's the best option for baseball right now because pitchers like Chris Sale are like last year pitched to a 13-10 record, but was obviously still one of the best pitchers in baseball as we all know him to be. If he was on a team that scored, a bunch of runs a game, like let's say the Blue Jays, his record probably would have been 18, 19, and 2, 3. I mean, we can all guess and say what could have happened, but because of this win-loss record, Chris Sale was not looked upon as one of the best in the game because he didn't win 15, 16, 17, 18 games on his own. But to kick it back to Sabermetrics, we're going to go back to Mets King for his own little rant about it.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, if you are someone who abides by sabermetrics, please don't take this personal. Actually, no. Take this freaking personal because you are the reason for my deep, deep anger on this topic. First and foremost, I don't want to end my point before I even start the damn thing, but I can literally end with this one point. An MLB poll of 100 players was taken on MLB.com, and the players were asked, do you follow or agree with the idea of sabermetrics? Guess what? 79% said no. And guess who plays the games, people? The damn players. Not the guys sitting in suits on the MLB Network stage who have never played a damn game of baseball in their life. You hear me, Brian Kenny? The beautiful game of baseball was created and played well before any of us, our parents, or our parents' parents were even an idea of life. And baseball did just fine without someone sitting on Microsoft Excel making up nonsense, stupid formulas. Tony Gwynn, as I will keep using, said things best when he said, the game of baseball is a simple game. You see the ball, you hit the ball, you catch the ball, you run. It's that simple. We don't need an advanced stat to tell me Giancarlo Stanton is a strong mofo who can hit the ball 900 feet. The eye test is good enough for me in at least that case. I mean, let's be real. How hard is it to see that a home run is when someone hits the ball over the wall or when the batter runs all the way home on a single batted ball? An RBI is when a batter brings home a runner that's on base. A run scored is when, buckle up, this one's tricky. It's when a runner scores and touches home plate safely. A stolen base, no, it's not when you take the bag and go to jail, but it's still simple enough to understand that it's when you run from first, second, or third and make it safely to the next base while the pitcher is pitching. And I can go on and on as to explaining how simple baseball is and should be, but let me talk about the one sabermetric stat that I hate the most, and that is WAR. And no, not the war I would love to have with Brian Kenny. The term WAR means wins above replacement. Let me ask you guys a question to those who like sabermetrics and agree with WAR. Can you tell me for a fact that because you live in Idaho, you have a better chance of not being shot over someone who lives in Chicago or New York? Most of you would say yes because stats back that up. But how in the hell can you tell me you know for a fact? Stats and projections do not tell you full stories. For example, one of the highest WAR players in MLB is Mike Trout. How do we know for a fact that his wins above replacement would be higher than Cespedes or Gregory Polanco had they played for the Angels and replaced Trout? Stats might show Trout is a better player, and he is. But how do we know Cespedes or Polanco wouldn't hit 350 with 40 homers and 140 RBIs? You don't, and you never will. You're going based on probability. So there's no computed stat that can tell me you know this for a damn guarantee. Therefore, if it's not a guaranteed stat, if it's not a basic, something that's already happened for a fact, it does not belong in baseball, it does not belong in sports, and it doesn't belong in life. The game of baseball was fine without computer technology, and it damn sure will be fine without it. Now again, I can go on and on about the in-depth sabermetrics like F4 and UZR and so on, but to me it's all overanalyzed gibberish. Some might say my mind is too small to understand them, and I just say back to them, maybe you're just a straight up nerd and your pocket protector is poking out. But in conclusion, I'm actually fine with scouting departments using sabermetrics to draft and scout players. Some of those metrics are really useful to those departments. But when we start using sabermetrics, something that might not even be a guaranteed fact, and WAR to judge Hall of Fame voting and how much money a player makes in their contract, you really got to sit there and think about what the hell is happening to the game of baseball. Now, what I'm going to do because I want some people to, they have a couple more points they might want to add. Maybe there was something they forgot. I'm going to go first to Mr. 27 Rings, and I'll give you one last chance if you have anything extra to say, if you have maybe something you've forgotten. So anything you want to add on, do so now, Mr. 27 Rings.
Thank you, Mets King. The only thing I have to say to add to it is
Interesting.
Very interesting.
no, it's not that I hear myself double.
Okay, we'll get back to Mr.
That's
27 Rings. It appears he might be speechless. We'll get to Euchre Squad. Do you have anything extra to add on about this topic?
like I said, the Brewers are trying to implement it, and I'm really not for it. Like you said, Mets King, it's a really ridiculous way to see why people are in the Hall of Fame or why they should be in the Hall of Fame or how much money they should be making on contracts, especially on the Hall of Fame topic, just because at that time, for the guys now, yes, a little bit, but most of the time, Sabermetrics wasn't even around when these guys were playing. And so how do you really know for sure just basing it off of these random wacky stats that Brian Kenny decides he just wants to come up with? I believe it's just ridiculous. Yes, there's some departments that use them well, and there's some departments that can keep it up, but I just think it is not a major thing that should be looked at when considering money, Hall of Fame, or anything along those guidelines.
Okay, I agree. Cali Athletic, since it's your first time here, do you might have anything you want to add? Maybe something you forgot?
I think I'll just end it with my personal opinion on the whole subject, and that would be that I think sabermetrics in general is an overrated stat that gives teams or players, I mean, an excuse to demand higher contracts, more money, more years, and I mean, like you were saying, you can't buy October success. So I mean, that's kind of all I really got to say.
Okay. And what I'm gonna do is, unless Mr. 27 Rings has something to add after, what I'm gonna do is I'm pretty
Okay, I'm
much.
good now.
Okay, you have something. Okay, you can add what you needed to say right now.
Yes, sir. All right. So every time I hear Brian Kenny talk on MLB Network, he uses a stat works for his favor. Then when somebody proves him wrong, he likes to use another stat out of the blue that I may have never heard of before just to prove that sabermetrics work. So in an argument, you can't just bring up one stat. Someone proves to you that stat is overrated and then bring up another stat out of nowhere just to try to save it. It just, to me, doesn't work like that. It is not a logical argument. And there have been some debates where he would say, Mike Trout's WAR surpasses Bryce Harper's WAR. Therefore, Trout should be getting $300 million and only $250 million for Bryce Harper. And I agree with Mr. A over there that why would you base on a contract on WAR, just one stat? It used to be player production, runs, stolen bases, home runs, RBIs. It used to be simple things like win-loss, which I'm sick and tired of hearing Brian Kenny and also Mr. Euchre saying that wins, losses doesn't matter. It actually does matter. Now, the reason why Chris Sale was not looked upon as the best pitcher at one time because he got hurt. That's the only reason why. And we already know Chris Sale is an emerging beast. All right, I had to bring that part up. But as I said before, all championship teams, or at least most of them, just draft and they just trade. That's it. Nothing more advanced. Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna make my closing little statement because as you can tell, I was the most adulated about this topic simply because, you know, I'm not gonna sit here and say I was one of the greatest baseball players that never made it. No, but I played the game, collegiate level, high school level, and Those things don't go around on those. And those are the most purest forms of baseball, is when we're growing up, we're kids, we're playing the game, we're having fun. Money's not involved. The game is pure. None of that nonsense matters. There's no war for collegiate players. You're not going to hear when they're drafting, what was his war from Louisville? What was his war? You're not going to hear that. You only hear that in the major league level because it has to do with money. It has to do with giving people jobs as well. Like Mr. 27 Ring said, Brian Kenny will use any damn made-up stat to back his points up. He'll make something up on the spot. Like if Harold Reynolds will say something like Brandon Phillips is the best second baseman in the game, he'll just bring up, I'm not saying he is or not. I'm saying, and he'll bring up Jose Altuve and be like, whoa, Jose Altuve's UVR was this, or he'll make something up on the spot. Jose Altuve's SNR, shortness to height ratio, whatever. He'll make something up to prove his point. And that's what I think Sabermetrics is more geared towards. People who want to argue about the game of baseball. People who want to try to bring back from the dead Babe Ruth and try to compare him with Bryce Harper. That's what Sabermetrics is geared towards. It does not help the game on the field. And if it doesn't help the game on the field, then to me it's pointless to have. Also want to add on another fact that everyone who's talking about World Series championships and how Sabermetrics is played like for the Royals, all these teams have had high payrolls. People are acting like they spent $20 million on a team. They're not all the Florida Marlins who won the 97 and the other World Series by, not really high payrolls. The Marlins actually beat the Yankees, who had I think it was a $200 million payroll, and they had like a $60 million payroll. That was one of the only ones I remember in recent memory where it was like that. Teams like San Francisco had $90 to $100 million on their payroll when they were winning World Series. The freaking Royals had a $120 million payroll. They're not coming up from $20 million with like, it's not an MLB The Show team, but $120 million is a lot of damn money. They had more than the Mets did. Everyone's talking about New York's a big market team. They should have. The Royals had a higher payroll. So I don't want to hear about they won because of Sabermetrics. They spent money to win. It's not like they didn't draft a team completely full of nobodies based on stats that were made up and then won the World Series. It took them 30 years to do this. Eventually, when you do something long enough, it's going to work, especially for 30 damn years. Of course, they're going to win one World Series in that time span. I mean, Cubs aside, but that's a whole nother thing that we can't explain with curses and whatnot. Anyway, the bottom line about Sabermetrics for me, and my personal opinion, is number one, baseball doesn't need it. And that's actually a fact, because baseball doesn't need a lot of things. You can't deny if Sabermetrics wasn't there, baseball wouldn't last, because Sabermetrics was just brought in recently, and baseball lasted 100 years before that. So you know that baseball doesn't need it to succeed because it has. Same thing with the DH to the National League, another topic that we brought up. Sabermetrics isn't needed in baseball. Sabermetrics doesn't really improve the game of baseball. And Sabermetrics, in my opinion, is not useless because scouting, it does help. But for 75 to 80% of the game, and the players agree, it's pretty much useless to them. They can't. How in the world is a player like Ruben Sahara going to sit there and tell me that Sabermetrics has helped or worsened his cause? If anything, it's worsened his cause. Players like that, who you can see with the eye, can actually play the game once in a while. Then you got people looking deep into their stats like, wow, he only hit 210. How can you tell me that because he hit 210 on the Mets, he's not going to hit 310 on the Cardinals? You can't tell me that because a computer said his stats were a certain thing in the past. If you can't tell me that, then don't use it to ruin his career. It's not right and it's not fair. You can't do that. That's why the eye test and scouts and things like that are way more way more appropriate for the game than some computer spitting out a stat sheet. And on that note, because again, I can go on and on and on, but we want this to be as short as possible. So I'm going to pass it back to Yuka Squad for the closing. And great job by all the guys on here. Hopefully Cali Athletic comes back. We know we have a lot of Ace fans. Thank you for listening. Yuka Squad, take it away.
All right, and on that note, thank you, everybody. That ends this week's episode of the Smashmouth Baseball Podcast. What is your opinion on Sabermetrics? Let us know in the comments, and as always, make sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe to us on YouTube. From all of us here at Smashmouth Baseball, we thank you for watching, and once again, we hope you have a good week, but your team does not. Good night, everybody.